Gambia's Minister of Health has revealed government plans to establish a commission of inquiry into the deaths of 70 children amid the acute kidney injury crisis. The United Nations Children Agency, UNICEF, is urging governments to protect children from climate devastation by adopting social services. And leaders of several Central African nations converge in DR Congo to initiate measures to ease growing political tension in Chad. This and more coming your way on The World Today. Hello, this is Eyeafrica TV and you are watching the World Today News Bulletin coming to you live from our studios in Banjul. Many thanks for joining us. I am Amadou Kante and now the news in detail. Now, the Minister of Health, Dr. Amadou Lamine Samate, has announced plans by the government of the Gambia to set up a commission of inquiry that will look into the deaths of 70 children from acute kidney injury (AKI). Dr. Samate made this disclosure at the National Assembly chambers on Wednesday, 26 October 2022, during the third extraordinary session of the National Assembly in Banjul. Mahfouji Sise has the details.
Addressing the lawmakers, the health minister, Dr. Samate said most of the child victims had diarrhea, vomiting, fever, and cough, and were referred from all 6 health regions in the country.
Detecting outbreaks of this nature that have multiple possible causes is very challenging, especially for developing countries. During this outbreak, the World Bank has agreed to construct a drug and food testing laboratory for us in the country, as there is also no food testing laboratory in this country. Preliminary work has already started to this effect. Distinguished Honorable Speaker, National Assembly members, I believe that our country has been assaulted. This is an aggression against our people from greedy, unscrupulous people. The manufacturing, distribution, and importation of contaminated drugs is criminal, and government sees it that way. However, due diligence needs to be carried out to get to the root of the problem. The license of the importer has been suspended. The 2 pharmacy outlets of the importer have been closed, and the police have started investigations in earnest. The Indian authorities have also been contacted, and we've been told that on their own, they had taken steps against the manufacturer, and this included closing their factory. And it is also stated that they found series of serious breaches in the factory. Government is on the verge of setting up a commission of inquiry into the issue. This, we believe, will help in identifying the problems and come up with recommendations to deal with the current problem and avert any future recurrences.
Minister Samate further informed MPs that due diligence needs to be carried out to get to the root cause of the problem, revealing that the license of the importer is suspended, the 2 pharmacy outlets of the importer have been closed, and the police have started the investigation in earnest. According to Mr. Samate, the Indian authorities had been contacted and on their own had taken steps against the manufacturer, including the factory closing. He disclosed that the Indian authorities found a series of severe breaches at the factory, reaffirming the Gambia government's commitment to establishing a commission of inquiry soonest.
In our newly established postgraduate training program at the EFSTH, with the support of the World Bank, we have employed 16 senior doctors from the West African sub-region, including a professor of pediatric nephrology. This is a professor of kidney disease in children. We also now have a Gambian nephrologist, that's a kidney disease specialist, at the Edward Francis Small Teaching Hospital.
In his own words, the Minister of Health sends condolences to the families of the late over 70 children that died as a result of acute kidney failure, adding, that the period has been difficult for the families of the victims, while praying that Allah grants the parents the fortitude to bear the loss.
I'd like to extend our sincere condolences to all the families affected, all the families who have lost their loved ones, and we pray that Allah grants all the departed children Al-Jannatul Firdaus. This period has been very difficult for the families of the children, and we pray that Allah grants them the fortitude to bear the loss. It has been a very difficult period for all the people, the families who were in hospitals with them. We saw their struggles. We saw their pain. Each time I visited the patients at the hospital, we saw the anxiety, the fear, the pain on the faces of the families. We understand what you went through. But only Allah can comfort you, and we pray that Allah comforts all of you.
Following the tragic death of up to 70 children caused by a harmful syrup imported from India, citizens and politicians alike have been calling on the Health Minister, Dr. Samate, to resign as a man of integrity. Minister Samate had ignored all calls for his resignation. In July 2022, the Health Ministry received information from the doctors at the Pediatric Department of the Edward Francis Small Teaching Hospital that they were seeing an increased number of children under 5 years who were presenting with symptoms of acute kidney injury. This information was conveyed to the Epidemiology Disease Control Unit of the Ministry of Health, whose mandate is to conduct surveillance and control disease of public health concern. Incident management was set up. The Gambian leader is under fire, with critics characterizing his leadership with rampant corruption and less efforts to redress the situation of the country until the World Health Organization had to intervene and reveal the actual number of deaths. Mafuji Sise, Eyeafrica News.
And we will return to matters of the National Assembly on the extraordinary session yesterday. But for now, though, moving on, United Nations Children Emergency Fund's UNICEF's recent report reveals that 559 children are currently exposed to high wave frequency. The report also indicated that more than 600 million children are exposed to one of the 3 other high heat measures, including high heat wave duration, high heat wave severity, or extreme high temperatures. Against this backdrop, the world's children body is calling on governments to protect children from climate devastation by adopting social services. Mariama Cham reports.
A heat wave is a period of excessively hot weather which may be accompanied by high humidity, especially in oceanic climate countries. The report estimates that by 2050, all of the world's 2.02 billion children are expected to be exposed to high heat wave frequency, regardless of whether the world achieves a low greenhouse gas emission scenario with an estimated 1.7 degrees of warming in 2050, or a very high greenhouse gas emission scenario with an estimated 2.4 degrees of warming in 2050. In partnership with the Data Collaborative for Children and launched in partnership with the UNICEF Goodwill Ambassador, the report findings underscore the urgent need to adopt the services children rely on as unavoidable impacts of global heating unfold. The report also makes a case for continued mitigation to prevent the worst impacts of the other high heat measures, including longer and hotter heat waves and high extreme temperatures. Heat waves are especially damaging to children as they are less able to regulate their body temperature compared to adults. The more heat waves children are exposed to, the greater the chance of health problems including chronic respiratory conditions, asthma, and cardiovascular diseases. Babies and young children are at the greatest risk of heat-related mortality. Heat waves can also affect children's environment, their safety, nutrition, access to water, and their education and future livelihood. Currently, 23 countries fall into the highest category for child exposure to extremely high temperatures. This will rise to 33 countries by 2050 under the low emissions scenario and 36 countries under the very high emissions scenario. Burkina Faso, Chad, Mali, Niger, Sudan, Iraq, Saudi Arabia, and India are among the countries expected to remain in the highest category in both scenarios. The report recommends to heads of states that they must provide children and young people with climate change education, disaster risk reduction education, green skills training, and opportunities to meaningfully participate and influence climate policy making. Reporting for Eyeafrica News, I am Mariama Cham.
And from the report there by Mariama Cham, let's now look at in other news across the continent. Now, following 1 year of political tensions, Sudanese protesters were once again out on the street to commemorate their first anniversary of their defiance to end military rule in the country. The pro-democracy activists were resolute in their continued demand for civil government, but analysts believe dialogue is only the way out of the crisis. Now, the protest against the junta has led to several deaths and thousands of people injured, leaving the country's political situation in, of course, a bleak situation. And let's have more details of that in this report.
It's been a violent and restive year in Sudan. The anti-coup protests have left many people dead and thousands injured, and this has led to a political deadlock. In August, the Sudanese Lawyers Committee set out a vision of a constitutional declaration to rule the rest of the transitional period. It suggested a new Supreme Council headed by a civilian leader and a security council for the military generals, among other critical issues. The declaration was welcomed and supported by the military, civilian leaders, and Western allies.
While pro-democracy groups marked the day with demands for an immediate handover to civil government, others say political compromise is the only way to reach a breakthrough in Sudan's year-long crisis.
Some analysts see the compromise as a window for a change.
There's no solution without a political settlement. Everyone should make concession if Sudanese want to get out of the bottleneck. The lawyers' constitutional declaration was agreed upon from all parties and can be the foundation to a political agreement.
Others believe that any solution involving the generals will not last.
The political situation should focus on removing the generals from power. Sudanese people demand a fully authorized civilian government and will not trust any new partnership with the military.
The demonstrators also see no future for a new partnership.
There is no compromise acceptable for us. For a whole year, our slogan was no negotiation, no partnership, no legitimacy for the generals. We want them to immediately hand over power, and if political parties accept this partnership, we will escalate.
The political dilemma has overshadowed Sudan's economy and security situation. The country is on the brink of an economic collapse and looming tribal conflicts in different parts of Sudan. However, the constitutional declaration can help in building trust between Sudanese stakeholders and pave the way for a political resolution.
And from that political report there in Sudan, let's now come closer home to neighboring Senegal, because women of different backgrounds from several African countries recently convened, of course, in Senegal for the International Forum of Business Women with a view to enhance women's capacity in entrepreneurship. Some of the women participants highlighted the constraints they faced in doing their activities, especially accessing financial support for women in rural areas. The participants also encouraged their governments to initiate policies that could avail women, of course, of their rightful opportunities. Let's have more details of that in this report.
The Women Business Forum's aim was to build the capacity of women in entrepreneurship. Presentations, training sessions and panels, all structured to create a space for shared learning and growth.
This forum is really an opportunity in that we've had a sharing of experiences, sharing ideas and choosing those that can be very useful for us to improve the entrepreneurship in our own country has been very beneficial for us. Personally, this forum is God-sent.
The forum also created room for the timely growing call for sustainable practices in business.
As agronomists, we want to make organic farming sustainable so that people can eat healthy and organic. We therefore provide training in soilless farming, which is suitable for everyone. It is a technique imported from Latin America and is very popular. We also do liquid and solid composting.
The attendants also highlighted the lack of dependable pathways to ease supply and demand bottlenecks.
We often have problems with roads. If it is possible to open up all the production areas, it will be a great success. We also have difficulties with financing. As we said, rural women do not have access to credit. They also have difficulty accessing training, and all this is our struggle today.
The coupled hit from the COVID-19 pandemic and the military operation in Europe have affected women's efforts to progress economically. The organizers called on African national authorities to develop concrete policies to enable supportive environment for women to be more competitive.
When politicians make decisions, they have the ability to enforce them. Governments must therefore support and train women while giving them all the tools they need to move forward.
The forum has been in existence for more than 10 years and now brings together more than 20,000 women from around the world. The forum hopes to encourage more women to take part in future sessions so as to boost the collective place of women in business.
Well, supporting women in business indeed is a great initiative. Well, with that report there coming from Senegal, we will now take a break and come back shortly. Stay with us, with us more coming ahead right after the break. Welcome back, and of course you are watching the World Today News Bulletin on Eyeafrica TV, and we are coming to you live from our studios in Banjul, and once again many thanks for coming along. Now let's return to matters of the National Assembly, because of course the Gambia National Assembly Wednesday convened an extraordinary session on the unfortunate acute kidney injury crisis that has claimed the lives of 70 children in the country through the consumption of certain syrup manufactured in India. 1/3 of the National Assembly members believe that it is a mandate upon them to take up the issue of as people's representative. Yahya Jammeh has been following yesterday's proceedings, and she now reports.
The motion for the Assembly to convene its third ordinary session in the 2022 legislative year was moved by the minority leader of the National Assembly, Honorable Alhaji S. Dabo, parliamentarian for Birkama North. As NAMS took positions to debate the motion, others commended the Health Ministry for the timely alert of a key. However, some parliamentarians believe that the Minister of Health, including individuals, must be courageous to take up responsibility for the deaths of these children.
Under this circumstance, Honorable Speaker, somebody must be held responsible. I am not saying the minister is responsible. I have already dilated how responsible the minister was as a medical practitioner, a surgeon for that matter. cure lives and saves a lot of lives. But under this circumstance, it is unfortunate that this happened under your watch, and somebody must take responsible even before this inquiry. And there are heads of institutions in this country, including Honorable Minister himself, head of Pharmacy Council. Let somebody take this board decision and take responsibility of this disease.
Honorable Speaker, the Gambia is at crossroads. Wonders will never end in this country if people of this country do not want to take responsibility. We need to take responsibility for our deeds, and we need to take responsibility for the roles that we play in our institutions. Until that is done, the truth will never come out. There is a lot of denial going on, and I think it is about time, as citizens of this country, we should be frank to each other.
I have actually heard some of my members actually praising in the Ministry of Health. And I think on this particular issue, we just need to do justice to the Gambian people. And in doing justice, I think we kind of rushing to upload the Ministry of Health rather. And looking at how this information was broke out, I think it emerged from WHO before the Ministry of Health. And we would have expected for such information to be relayed by the Ministry of Health. And I think it has in fact went to an extent that the Ministry of Health were challenging the WHO as to the way and manner the information was broke out.
As far as this current situation is concerned, we are all victims. And the most vulnerable are the children. And these children, we are the parents. So in that regard, I want to seize this opportunity to thank the minority leader for coming up with such a motion to see to it that a committee is being assigned to investigate to the bottom of this crisis that we are faced with as a nation.
Meanwhile, the National Assembly's Select Committee on Health is tasked to do a thorough investigation of issues surrounding the acute kidney injury deaths of children and present a report in which parliamentarians will take turns to debate the committee's findings. The deaths of the 70 children in the Gambia are said to be caused by the consumption of paracetamol and other cough syrups manufactured by a maiden pharmaceutical company based in India. The deaths of the children have caused a lot of commotions, as many call for the dissolution of the Pharmacy Council and the resignation of the Health Minister. With the matter reaching the National Assembly, many have hoped that solutions and answers to the root causes and those responsible will be addressed. Reporting for Eyeafrica News, I am Yahya Jammeh.
And of course, next to our final story now, because amid growing political tensions in the Republic of Chad, leaders of several Central African countries met in DR Congo's capital Kinshasa to discuss the political transition in Chad. Now, the Democratic Republic of Congo's president has been identified as mediator for Chad's prevailing political crisis since the assassination of the country's longest-serving president. Now, the son of the former president is currently the leader of the Central African nation, but his decision to prolong his stay in power triggered the recent crisis or tensions in Congo, or Chad rather, and let's have more details of that in this report.
Leaders and representatives of 9 Central African countries gathered in Kinshasa to discuss the political transition in Chad. The meeting was called by the DRC President Felix Tshisekedi, who is the current chairperson of the Economic Community of Central African States.
Your participation at this session is a testimony of the interest that you have for the current transition process in the Republic of Chad, and the brotherhood that binds us all to the people of Chad, with whom we share the same destiny.
Chad has been rocked by a political crisis since its longtime leader, Idriss Déby, was killed in April in a military operation against rebels. The former Chadian president's son, Mohamed Dabi, seized power after his father's death. He had initially promised to rule for 18 months and hand over power to a civilian government. But a nationwide forum recently extended his transition period to 2 years, sparking protests in Chad. The leaders of the Central African Trade Bloc have now named President Felix Tshisekedi as the mediator of the political crisis in Chad.
The conference has appointed His Excellency President Felix Tshisekedi, the President of the Democratic Republic of Congo and President of the ECCAS, as the facilitator of the transitional process in the Republic of Chad.
President Mohamed Derby has promised to organize an election in 2024. But Chadian opposition and civil society groups have been calling for protests to demand a quicker transition to democratic rule. The Congolese president has been tasked to ensure that the military government in Chad hands over power to civilian rule to prevent an outbreak of violence and further bloodshed. President Felix Tshisekedi has taken over this new role at a time when his country is facing increased rebel activity that has forced thousands of people to flee their homes.
Well, Chad is among several African countries currently engulfed with political crisis. We only hope that peace will return to all those countries as soon as possible. And with that report coming from DR Congo, we now eventually bring this news edition to an end. But for more details on this and other stories, as always, as ever, you can visit on our website on Eyeafrica.tv. But for now, for the pleasure of your company, thanks for watching. Stay safe and do have a pleasant evening. Bye for now.